welcome to my channel. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we are going to be talking about, that's right, fantasy-related band names this time. So we did fantasy-related songs in metal, and this time we're going to be specifically talking about band names that are directly taken from fantasy and jumping in here. So I'm excited here because there were definitely some that were new to me, and that's why I've had so much fun with researching to get ready to make these videos. I found a bunch of really great stuff, and so let's jump in and talk about it. So as with the song list, these are in no particular order. This isn't like a ranking or like a top 10. This is just 10 bands that have directly taken their names from fantasy, and so let's jump in with the first one, which is Farseer. And this is a power metal band from Scotland, and I couldn't find anything specifically confirming that they did indeed take their name Farseer from the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. However, considering, they're a power metal band, and they do very specifically have some songs about the Wheel of Time and some other fantasy stuff in there, I figure it's a pretty safe bet, so I'm still including them. They have 2 albums currently, although they are no longer active at this point. This was some interesting stuff with listening to them as well, and so I definitely was not aware of this band prior to researching, but if you like power metal, definitely check out Farseer. The next one is Caledon Brood. And so Caledon Brood, which you may already be able to tell, is from Malazan. And this is a black metal band from Utah in the United States. And I am not into black metal. And the funny thing is, with black metal bands, it's like, I think it's a rule that almost every black metal band has to either be based on Lord of the Rings or have stuff about Lord of the Rings or be named after Lord of the Rings. So I haven't included very much. I've tried to, for these videos, at least to start with, I've tried to not include Lord of the Rings much because there's just so many. I could do videos on that all on its own. But Caledon Brood is a black metal band. Of course, their stuff is about Malazan, and while it's not my thing, listening to it, or at least in looking at the lyrics and stuff, was pretty interesting. They're like an atmospheric black metal band. They're very inspired, apparently, by the black metal band Summoning, which I also haven't listened to, but which is like one of the really big Tolkien Lord of the Rings kind of bands, and so that's why I mentioned it. So they do it, but they do it with Malazan. They've only done 1 album, and they do not appear to be active anymore. When I was trying to look at it, it looked like the last time they'd said anything was quite a few years ago, so potentially not active anymore. But if you like black metal and like Malazan, this is definitely a winner for you. All right, next up we have Dragcar, which is a death metal band from the United States, Washington State. And this band is obviously named after the Dragcar from the Wheel of Time. And they have a couple songs that are very much about Wheel of Time, and then it's kind of more like loose interpretations of some stuff from the Wheel of Time as well in there. With looking at the lyrics of some of their songs, you could definitely see, this definitely sounds like this is talking about some elements of the Wheel of Time. And it's interesting because Wheel of Time might not sound like the type of thing to really be related to death metal, black metal, some of the really brutal type of stuff. But when you think about it, there's a lot of stuff in there. And I don't have any on here, but there are some Wheel of Time black metal bands that I found as well. So we'll probably talk about those in a different video. I do plan to do one that is specifically songs about the Wheel of Time, because there are a bunch of those too. But yeah, so it was. I was listening to this, and it definitely sounds like old school death metal. If you're into old school death metal, definitely worth checking out. They do have 1 album only so far. They're kind of newer though, and they do still appear to be active, so we may see more. Are you surprised there hasn't been more power metal? I did purposely make the list. There is some more on here, but I very specifically tried to not do all power metal because there's so much power metal with fantasy, so I wanted to mix it up and do some other stuff. The next one, though, is definitely a power metal / electronic type of band, and that is Beast in Black. And they are based on Berserk, which is a manga. And I'm counting that as fantasy because I wanted to include this band because I love this band. a lot. And I have not read or consumed anything with Berserk. I think there's an anime too, I believe. And I'm not really into manga or anime or anything, but this band is like Beast and Black is preferring to the main character from Berserk. And also, they have lots of songs over the course of their 3 albums that are directly based on Berserk. And so, a lot of stuff there. They are just absolutely fun. They're from Finland. And it starts off kind of like very, like old school power metal-y, but they've gotten a bit more 80s electronic as they've gone along. So even if you don't like power metal, if you like 80s kind of almost techno-y stuff at some points, it is catchy as all heck. I definitely recommend checking out Beast and Black. They are just a blast. Like I said, I absolutely love them. I have several of their albums on vinyl as well, and I just love them and wanted to make sure I included them. So we're counting Berserk as fantasy. So don't come in the comments and tell me it doesn't count. I'm counting it, and there's another one coming. So next up, though, we have The Wise Man's Fear, which is named after The Wise Man's Fear, which is a book in the Kingkiller Chronicles. This is a metalcore band, or they call themselves fantasy core, just because they are very specifically based on fantasy, and they're a core band, and everything's, you just add core to it. That's how it works in metal. But they're from Indiana in the United States, and this one, I've been aware of this band for a long time. And it's one where, since they do fantasy stuff, I'm like, I want to like them more than I do. But I'm like, they have some songs that are pretty good, but I'm also not the biggest fan. If you like metalcore, especially when I say metalcore, I mean like more modern melodic metalcore. Specifically, though, they're definitely worth checking out. They've got some good stuff. They have stuff that's very heavy and also very catchy, so a good mix there. They do have 4 albums, plus if you don't like screamy type vocals, they also have 3 instrumental versions of their albums as well that you can still check out if you just kind of want to hear them. And they are active and are, I think, decently well known. I've been aware of them for a while at least. I don't know that they're decently well known outside of metal, but definitely decently well known. So always cool to see that. And a band that is very obvious based on fantasy, and they wear that on their sleeve very proudly as well, and have talked about it. Just trying to, bring more attention to fantasy books, which I think is a fantastic goal. Next up, probably the most well-known on this list in general is Monomarth. And so I said I was trying not to include a ton of Lord of the Rings stuff, but I feel like I have to include a Monomarth because obviously that's from Tolkien, Mount Doom, Monomarth. And they're a melodic death metal band from Sweden. And they have been around for a really long time. They have 12 albums. They're still active. They have been just a huge, huge metal band. And despite the name, they actually, most of their stuff is about Vikings. And so they're also sometimes called Viking metal. But a lot of it has definitely a fantasy feel to it as well. And they're another one where I'll listen to Monomarth. It's not a band that I will just I'm gonna go listen to a bunch of them. But I feel like most metal people, even if it's not their genre, everybody's cool with Monomarth. They're just kind of one of those bands that they're just huge, and it's hard to hate them for any reason because they've been around so long and just are good at what they do, making all their Viking related metal. So Monomarth, if you've heard of none of the others, you may have heard of them, and so I figure I had to include them for that reason. Next up, we have one which I was definitely not aware of, but was really interesting, which is Oathbringer. And this is a power metal band from Serbia. I always love seeing bands from different areas because it's really cool. And so I have actually a pretty good mix of locations for bands here as well. Now, Oathbringer is another one where I am generally assuming that it's a reference to Stormlight. Although, I feel like maybe it's a rule that if you name your band after a series of books, you can only sing about other series and not that one specifically. Maybe that's a rule because I commented about Farseer up there as well. But they do have songs for everything about Conan, Barbarian, to Wheel of Time, to Lord of the Rings. So when you got fantasy songs and you have a very clear fantasy name, I'm generally going to assume that you're referencing Stormlight with that name. And they were really interesting too. They kind of bridge between heavy metal, power metal, depending. But it's just some pretty good stuff too, so definitely worth checking out. Once again, I will say, although I've included a lot of other genres, most of the power metal ones, you're like, even if it's not your thing, it probably won't turn you off as much as black metal will. Because if you don't like black metal, you don't want to listen to black metal. But the power metal, it is common, but I made sure to include other stuff too for fun here. But yeah, so Oathbringer was a new one I found out, as well as the next one, which is another power metal band. This one's also from Utah. We've had a couple of Utah bands, which is interesting. It's not really a state you think of having a ton of metal coming from it. At least I don't. But that is Prydain. Now this is another band where I couldn't find anything directly saying that it is named after the Prydain Chronicles. So I'm making a little bit of an assumption here. This is like I said, a power metal band from Utah. But they do specifically, like, their music and their album that they have out, they just have one album so far, is about their own fantasy story. So, like, they're telling a fantasy story. They have their name is a fairly well-known fantasy series from back in the day. I'm making that assumption, and I'm calling it. Plus, I just think it's really cool to see stuff related to Prydain, because people don't talk about that series as much anymore. And I really loved that as a kid, and reading it as an adult, I still really enjoyed it. So I just thought that was cool and wanted to include them. They are still active. I don't think I even said for Oathbringer, but they have one album so far and are still active. But yeah, so another power metal. Then this is a very European power metal style. So lots of high singing and that kind of thing. Whereas the last one we talked about was a little bit more of the power versus the kind of almost glammy style that Prydain was. So definitely a kind of a different feel. Something you get a lot, though, in power metal and a lot of European power metal. So that is that band. Now, I did tell you there was another Berserk one coming. And I also had to include this band because also I love this band. So, gosh, maybe I should just try to do Berserk, because there are two different bands that love it so much that they named themselves after it. And so this one is Brand of Sacrifice, which is a deathcore band from Canada. And they've got 2 albums so far. Brand of Sacrifice, my understanding, is directly related to something that's in Berserk as well. And I think they've got some songs that are related as well. It's harder for me to tell because I don't know unless it's specifically stated that that's what it is about. But the band itself is, of course, themed on Berserk. And this band is just something else. I absolutely love them. They're one of my favorite bands I've seen live. I've seen them twice, and they just absolutely killed it. Both times they were touring with much larger bands than them, and they stole the show, in my opinion. Both times completely were just absolutely fantastic. And so if you like deathcore and you don't know Brand of Sacrifice, check out Brand of Sacrifice, because they are amazing. If you don't like deathcore, you're probably not going to like Brand of Sacrifice, but maybe check them out anyway, just for fun, just to hear what the vocalist Kyle can do, because his vocals are insane and is pretty great. So that is Brand of Sacrifice. I want to end this with one that I included this just because I really honestly thought it was hilarious that there was a black metal band that's called Belgorath. So Belgorath being the sorcerer from the Belgariad, which is a very young reading fantasy series that is very much not dark at all. And so that one really did kind of surprise me, that there's a black metal band called Belgorath. They're from Bulgaria. Now the thing is, as far as I can tell at least, they don't have any songs about the Belgariad. What do they have songs about? General kind of fantasy elements, and you guessed it, Lord of the Rings, of course. So, like I said, it's like a rule with black metal. You have to reference Lord of the Rings, or you're not a real black metal band, I guess. It's like black metal. It's got to be either Satan, Lord of the Rings, just general like darkness. Those are kind of the rules. Don't come at me, black metal people. I've promoted multiple black metal bands, even though I don't like black metal very much. So, but yeah. So I just found it funny that it was Belgorath, because it seems like a really odd choice to pick for a name. And once again, I can't 100% confirm, especially some of these bands are not like, big enough that there's not a lot of information about them. Can't 100% confirm, but it's called Belgorath. They have the fantasy elements. I'm assuming that is the case, and I just thought it was really funny as well. And it's definitely black metal. So once again, I feel like black metal is. If you're watching this at this point and you don't know what black metal is, definitely look it up, because it'll be fun. And then record your reaction and send it to me because it'll be great. And I would absolutely love to see that. But yeah, so this one, they did do 2 albums. They're not currently active. But it was hit or miss with these bands whether or not they're active or not either. But hopefully we'll see more of the fantasy type of music here. But anyway, that is it for this one. Those were 10 bands that took the name of their band directly from fantasy books or series. Let me know what you thought about these. If you've heard of any of them, or if you check any out, definitely let me know. I do have. I didn't do a playlist for this one because of the fact that it's not individual songs, but maybe I'll have to. I don't know. I'll definitely start making some playlists. I'll link the previous playlists, however many happen to be out when this comes out, as well, and then do some specific songs. Maybe I'll just pick a random song from each one of these for the ones that are actually on Spotify, because not all of them are, and go from there. So we'll see with it. But that is it for this one. Like I said, let me know your thoughts. This was such a fun video in this series of videos that I have planned to research, to make, to do, to talk about. So I really hope you enjoy it, because these have been a lot of fun for me. That's it for this one, though. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description, as always, for the Wizard of the Enclave Discord. If you want to talk books or, music and music about books and fantasy-related stuff in general. It's a lot of fun, and we would love to have you. And, of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.